You're listening to Media Savvy Moms with Melody and Marilyn, a podcast by Parents Aware, your go-to for information on how to talk to kids and teens about pornography and healthy sexuality. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Media Savvy Moms. Today, we are doing a Q&A, which is our short show where we answer questions from our audience on the air. And sometimes we do some myth busting. If you'd like to submit a question to the show, feel free to email us at admin@parentsaware.info, or you can submit your questions on any of our Media Savvy Moms or Parents Aware social media platforms, and we will read them on the air. Today's question is, how do I start the conversation about pornography with my kids?
Yeah,
Marilyn.
good question. I don't
Yep.
know if you notice anytime you take on a big project, I like to do DIY at home. Getting my head wrapped around starting is sometimes harder than actually doing the project because
Yes.
I know that it might be hard. Anyway, I have a few thoughts on this, and I'm just going to assume that this question came from somebody who hasn't started the conversation already. And I'm going to
Mhm.
assume that the child is between 8 and 12 years old because there's lots of answers that we could give for this, but let's assume that you have an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old and you've never had the conversation. How do you start? Well, I would follow kind of 3 guides, and that is to start small. Don't try to cover everything at once. Um, and the goal is to open the door to a conversation.
Mhm.
So, getting the word pornography out there on the table so that they can say, oh, mom or dad are cool to talk about this conversation. And then ask questions that build trust, or ask your child. A simple way to start is, how would you define a bad picture, or how would you define pornography? I like to use the word pornography because it lets them know that you're willing to talk about that. And then finally, just finish with, tell them that if you can remember to do this, that you're going to come back to this conversation again. Keep it short
Mhm.
and simple. That's how I would start.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Not a one and done. So don't have to eat. We always say don't have to eat the whole hamburger at once, right? Or how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? Yeah, great answer. So really the question we're answering is, how do I start the conversation about pornography with my tween? Right?
That's where I was thinking.
So yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And it's good to be focused in our answers. So, um, my input, my 2 cents were similar. Ask them a question first, get that conversation started,
It's one
and
of our
then
favorite ways to get a conversation going, isn't it? I mean, we fall back on
right.
that a lot. Sorry to
It's
interrupt, but
true.
it's
No,
it's
it's true.
brilliant, if I do say
Right.
so myself.
Yes, it is quite brilliant. Yeah. It is though, because then you get a flavor of where they're coming from and what they're really asking, instead of making an assumption and like dumping all your information on your kids, right?
Mhm.
And then also think about creating a space and a time. Sometimes these things will happen spontaneously, which is awesome. But if you're contemplating, how do I start this conversation? Maybe a great way to create a framework would be to think of a space and a time that would be good to start this conversation. And we've had guests on the show who've talked about um, a good space is in the car. Talk in the car when it's not so intimidating, because you don't have to look at them eye to eye. Sometimes that can be um, scary, right? Because you're driving, you're chilling, and you're just kind of talking. But also, you don't have anywhere to run away to. Right?
Not just your
Captive
kids,
audience.
you don't have a place to run away to.
Right, exactly. My kids know that if they have something serious to talk about, they can pull me into my room. That's kind of our safe place. My parents we'd sit on the foot of the bed That was our like cool chat place with mom and dad, like after our date or whatever, or if we had something serious. So those are great spaces, a great time. While you're folding laundry, while you're doing dishes, or while you're working in the yard. Kristen Jensen came on and she talked about talking shoulder to shoulder while we're doing other things. So that's my
And
advice.
I'm listening to what you said. I thought of Mandy Major. She often talks about uh, things she wants to go back and address with her kids. And she's very thoughtful about finding that right time to do it. And that doesn't, we don't want to delay having these important conversations, but I do think if you ponder about what you want to tell your kids, you're going to get ideas come to you. And so take a day or two and really let you meditate on it and see what comes to your mind. There was another thought. You mentioned bringing up conversations in the car and not being able to run away. One trick I've read recently was that if you bring up those tricky topics, kind of the last block away from home,
Mhm.
and if either of you do need to escape, if your tween needs to get out of the car, then they have that exit. But at least you've brought it up and then you can
Uh-huh.
come back to it. But they don't have to feel like, okay, now that we had that awkward conversation, we're in the car for another 30 minutes. What do we do now?
Sure, that's fair. And it's funny because I just had a talk like this with one of my kids, and sometimes they'll stick with it if they want to, right? And they'll ask to transition. We were having a talk at the kitchen table, and my son, which is not giving anything away because I only have sons, my son said, "Hey, can we move into the living room where it's more comfortable?" And I'm like, dude, he still wants to keep talking. Rock on,
I
right?
love when kids do that.
Yeah, so follow their lead for sure.
Mhm,
So, we do have a resource for you
mhm.
that goes along with this question. What is it, Marilyn?
We'd like you to download our quick guide to safer screen habits. It's got some great tips on how to incorporate the conversation about pornography and do that in a way that really isn't a standalone discussion. It's built into this whole concept of safer screen habits.
It really isn't a
It's
standalone conversation.
not.
And I love how we talk about having a family power meeting because it ties everybody in.
Yeah, so I'll just explain the PDF a little bit. You're going to create this, as you say, a family power meeting, and share ideas and get your kids' input. So you're not having a conversation at your kids, you're having this conversation with your kids.
Mhm. It's a beautiful thing. We always want their buy-in for sure. Like we were talking about, we want to talk at them,
Mhm.
right? We want to talk with them. So, a little quote to get in your noggin. This is from Jane D. Hull. At the end of the day, the most overwhelming key to a child's success is the positive involvement of parents.
Mhm. So you're going to download as your challenge that quick guide to safer screen habits. But think as you're doing it, like whether you feel like that conversation is successful the first time you have it or not is kind of irrelevant. That's why we chose this thought from Jane D. Hall, is that it's just being involved and making your kids aware that you're willing to have that big conversation, little bits over a long time. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Media Savvy Moms podcast. For detailed show notes and links to any of the resources mentioned today, visit parentsaware.info. To connect with us on social media, find us on Instagram at Media Savvy Moms and on Facebook and Twitter at Parents Aware. We would love to get your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to this podcast. Until next week, let's keep talking.